Hi, how's everybody doing?
Great, excited to meet you.
Good. I see.
Hey,
I just wanted, I wanted to come on and introduce myself. My name is Adam Christensen. I'm running for Florida's third district, which, as most of you now know, is Ted Yoho's district. Most people didn't know where or what it was until about a few weeks ago, which is kind of crazy. I am 26-year-old. I've started a couple different companies since I graduated from college, and we are running an entirely youth-led campaign. So I am actually the old guy on the campaign, and we have about 50 people under the age of 23 that are running everything. And yeah, so that's kind of us right now. We are running, obviously, on universal basic income, Medicare for all. We're running an extremely progressive and left campaign, but in rural Florida. And it seems to be going very well. And we're really starting to be able to pick up some traction, especially with conservative voters, former or current Trump voters, independents, and obviously Democrats. And so that's really what we've been focusing on, is making sure that we can not just propose things that are going to help people's lives, but actually be able to speak in a language that reaches them. And so that's something that we've done very well with. We've got a couple of phone banking things that are coming up. Our primary is on the 18th, and so it is coming up very quickly. It's looking very good for us right now. And so we are going to start scaling and start really building to go into the general, and we will more than likely be facing a guy named Judson Sapp, who is the only candidate in the country that Roger Stone has endorsed, and is also touring with him right now to try to get him through his primary. And so that's kind of where we're at and how it's shaping up. So yeah, happy to be on. Were you going to ask a question, or did you just want me to keep?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I was muted. Um, do usually we do questions at the end. Does that sound? Yeah. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I can. Yeah, I mean, I can give you a breakdown of the district and everything like that. I just always think it's, more fun for people to kind of, ask questions and then be able to answer it and kind of, but we can do it either way, works.
okay, yeah, no, let's shoot. All right, questions about Adam. Anyone popping up from this introduction now? You can raise your Zoom hands. Um, well, starting out, I have a question. So in this rural red district, currently with a Republican representative, how do you bring across your progressive platform? Like, what are some of the talking points that you've been having success with? Um,
Yeah. So the first thing we need to understand is, especially here, we have two of the hardest, lowest income counties in the entire state, and actually in the entire country. I think Union County's like average income is $13,000 a year. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's filled with private prisons. I mean, almost the entire population is either in the prison industry or the prison system. And so, really, when we're talking to people, especially right now, I mean, nobody's doing well. Tons of people are about to lose their homes. They're not able to survive. They're not able to have a decent enough job to be able to survive. And so they're really just struggling and they're fighting for survival. And I actually had a debate last night, and the people that we had on were Republicans, people from the rural parts of the county, because we need to be able to talk to them. We need to be able to reach them. And so, like the very first question was, are you happy with the leadership in your party, like at the top? And my response was, I grew up a Republican, like I grew up a conservative Republican in Indiana. And the one thing that my family always taught me was that it didn't matter which party was in power. They didn't care whether or not I was going to live or die. They didn't care. They cared about themselves and their donors, and they cared about the people that backed them, and that was it. And so for me, as soon as you get past that and you start connecting with people on an emotional level and say, look, they don't care about us. It doesn't matter what we look like or who we are. They don't care about us. And so we have to actually focus on people. We have to make sure people are going to be okay. And that's where we start. And so I've actually found, especially right now, that emergency UBI of $2,000 a month is extremely receptive to. And the reason is I say, look, In 2008, you bailed out the biggest companies in the world. You gave money to the biggest banks in the world, and you were told that that would be good. You were told it was an investment. But what happened was they made all their money back, and they've done better than ever, and your lives got more expensive, and you never got a return on that investment. And now we just did it again. And we decided we were going to give money to the biggest companies in the world again, and we weren't going to take care of people like you and me. And as soon as you start talking about things like that and say, here's how we get through this, here's how we focus on small businesses and family-owned businesses in our small towns, and here's how we actually care about ourselves, then you can change a ton of minds. And you can be as left as possible and progressive. It doesn't matter, as long as you connect with people on an emotional level. And so that's kind of what we've found works really, really well, especially here.
I had a question, but I can't raise my Zoom hand, Colleen. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so Adam, you're going for your primary now, and I see that there's 2 other challengers. So when voters ask you, what is it that has you stand apart from those other 2, like what is your pitch that says you would be the best person to pass through the Democratic primary?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. We really saw it last night with the debate. We were the only ones that showed up. Like, I was the only one that showed up to the protest in Palatka, which is one of the rural towns outside of Gainesville. I mean, the people on the Democratic side who are running, they don't leave Alachua County. They don't go where it's difficult to talk to people. They don't make that effort to actually reach out to other communities. They just stay where they're comfortable. And what we understand is if we don't branch outside of Alachua County, we will never win this place. It will never happen. And so number one, not only are we not afraid to actually show up to things and actually march in the streets and actually show people, not just talk about things, but actually show it with actions. But on top of that, we're building the infrastructure in those locations to be able to carry our message forward for the general election. On top of that, obviously, we are not self-funding our campaign. Like, one of our opponents just dropped basically $43,000 of his own money into the campaign within the last week. I don't know why, but he couldn't compete with us on fundraising. Like, our average donation is $16 and it comes from everywhere. And on top of that, obviously, we're youth-led and we're a youth campaign. But what that means is that we were able to transition digitally for this election very quickly. And so that is kind of, the things that sets us apart. And at the same time, we are the most progressive campaign out there. And we're actually showing people that we're not just saying things, we're actually doing it. And our entire campaign is pretty much led by activists and organizers.
Andrew, you typed your question in chat. Can we hear you to ask it? Okay, no mic. All right, so Andrew was asking, you mentioned your campaign is youth-based. What are you doing for young people right now? And what beneficial policies for young people will you advocate for if elected?
Sure. The biggest, the pitch of our campaign has been and will continue to be, if you work 8 hours a day, you should be able to own a home. You should be able to start a family. You should have money left over. But right now we don't have that. And especially for college kids and people that are out of college, the number one reason that people cannot afford to get a home is because of predatory student debt. 17-year-olds are not allowed to buy tobacco. They're not allowed to buy alcohol. They're not allowed to serve in the military. But for some reason, we think it's okay for 17-year-olds to get $50,000 to $200,000 of predatory debt just to get an education. And so, number one, we have to get rid of that, because if we get rid of that, it will be the largest housing boom the United States has ever seen. It will be one of the large economic booms that we'll ever see. On top of that, we need to get rid of predatory companies in general. So we live in a location where predatory towing is horrendous. Every single person at the University of Florida knows that at some point they will be towed. They will have to pay $100 to $200 to get their car back. Or somebody's going to boot them because they left their car for 2 minutes to go across the street to get McDonald's or something like that. So we have to stop these kind of things from happening. And the people that those things are happening to are young people. The people who are not able to start a family are young people. And so at the end of the day, our campaign knows what actually affects us because we're being affected by it as well. Like I've moved 5 times in 5 years, like apartments. We don't have stability. And so those are really the things we're hitting on, is because we know what it's like because it's us. We know how to represent ourselves because, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Kimberly, are you ready? You had your hand up for a question?
Yeah. So I like asking this, and seeming as how you are running a youth-led campaign and you're such an advocate for them. Are you in favor of lowering the voting age?
Yeah, I mean, we're not really talking about it, but yeah, I am. I mean, I think it should be 16. I think that if you can drive a car, you should be able to vote. It's just me.
Yeah, no, cool. I love that. Thank you. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you think that might empower young voters to get more actively involved in their younger years?
Well, I think right now, especially, we are seeing youth activism at a level that we've never seen before because of things like TikTok, because of social media, because they're able to organize. I mean, we saw the kids out of Parkland organize better than gun rights activists have been able to organize for years. What we're seeing is it doesn't matter your age, it matters your will and how much you want it at the end of the day. And what we're seeing is when people actually see that they can have a voice and they can actually be powerful, and it doesn't matter who they are or their age, it happens. I mean, for most of the people on our campaign, the reason they believed that we could run this congressional campaign is because we saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez be able to do it in New York, is because we saw young people, the youngest people that have ever been elected, actually successfully do it. And so we saw this year hundreds of young people run all over the country for all levels of office. And so when people actually see people like them that can do things that they never thought were within reach, it actually inspires people to do those things. And so for us, you know, I am so excited to see who comes out of our campaign that worked on our campaign and what they do going forward because of what they did here. And I think at the end of the day, what we're not just building something that is short-sighted. We are building a blueprint for how young people can actually take power back or take power for themselves. And the example I always use is most of the people that get elected into office, especially in Congress or the Senate, are 50 years or older. And the people who go to vote for them actually believe that they're going to represent them. And the people that go to vote in the highest amounts and margins are people that are over the age of 50. Well, if you see somebody your age who looks like you, has the same background as you, you're going to think that that person is going to represent you. But if you have nobody that's 25 years old, if you have nobody that's 20 years old in your local elections or running for Congress or anything like that, you're not going to think that those people know what it's like for you. And so you're far less likely to be excited about them, and you're far less likely to actually go vote for them. And so we're starting to see that, especially with young people across the country, we're seeing more youth activism and more people going to vote simply because they're actually being able to vote for people like them.
Thank you.
Yenny, you have a question?
Yes, I'd like to know how you came to UBI and Yang, and what what brought you to UBI.
Oh, what brought? So I was actually asked about 2 years ago. I had just started dating my girlfriend, and she asked me, and I don't know why we were talking about this, but she was like, if you had one dream policy, what would it be? And my response, like I thought a couple seconds, and I was like, well, you know, my dream policy, if it ever got implemented, I don't think it will, because I don't think the Overton window is ever going to be there, but I would love to actually do a universal basic income, because I think it would be one of the biggest things that could help with the wealth gap and actually give people the power to have some control over their lives. And then she was like, well, what's UBI? And so I explained. And then I saw Andrew Yang actually not just talk about it, but make it the main policy platform for his campaign. And, you know, at that moment I was like, I don't know what he's going to be able to do. I don't know if he's going to be able to push this into the mainstream. And then he did. And I just sat there going, I don't know how he did that, but I love the fact that he did that. And that is absolutely amazing. And so that's kind of like, I knew about UBI before Andrew Yang, but watching it actually like a policy that I had read about and I had thought about and I knew about, but I had never seen somebody actually advocate for. I thought seeing that in real life was just absolutely amazing. I don't know what's going on with my screen.
I think the video froze. Oh, now you disappeared. Oh, there you are. And you're muted.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Standard electronic conference. It's okay, it happens. All right. Can we unmute him? All right, there we go.
Yeah. So I think the other question that I have that's part of that is obviously UBI is not necessarily something that is literally going to fix everything. There are other things that still need to happen in addition to that. And which of them do you identify as the most important?
Yeah, and the way that I think about this is, you want to give people more money, right? But you don't want to just give them more money so then they're spending it on higher expenses. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, we want them to be able to actually do something with that money that they have and have some freedom and have the ability to have, like, take their lives back. And so the couple biggest things I think, and I call them middle-class tax cuts because that's what they are. At the end of the day, they're going to give people significant amounts of money back. One is universal childcare. It has an ROI of 1.25. So every dollar you put in, you get $1.25 back. And that would free up about $8,000 to $10,000 per family, per child, per year. And so that's almost $8,000 right back in the pockets of most families. On top of that, Medicare for All is going to save small businesses and really families about $8,000 to $10,000 as well. So you implement those two things, and people have $20,000 to $22,000 back each year that they never had before. And for somebody who lives in Union County, where the average income that they're bringing in is $13,000 a year, you just doubled their income overnight. And so for me, UBI, wonderful. Medicare for All has to happen. Universal childcare needs to happen. And if you do those things, I think that once they have that money back, again, they should not just want to have to spend it on expenses. Like, we need to give them an avenue to be able to actually have control of their lives. And so one thing that I proposed, actually the building behind me, this is called the Innovation Hub. It's in downtown Gainesville, Florida. And it's basically a small business incubator with funding. And it basically has office space, has affordable office space, has a mentorship program. And basically anybody who has an idea can apply to be in here. Show that their idea, they actually could do it and build a business out of it. And then they get support to be able to actually start that small business. And so what we need to be able to do is put locations like that in all of our small towns that really focus on small and family-owned businesses and community businesses. Because right now, well, the one thing we don't have is jobs and companies coming to these areas simply because, well, all the jobs take the money out of these areas. So we have Nestle right now who's coming in to bottle water in High Springs. And if they do that, they're going to dry up the town of High Springs, and the town of High Springs is going to be gone. And so, like, we're seeing the rural towns stand up and actually fight against giant companies who are killing small businesses here. So we need to grow small businesses, family-owned businesses. And I think the best way we can do that is by, one, getting people money back in their pockets and enough money to be able to do it, and then giving them a location and a system to be able to grow those businesses and actually take their ideas and benefit their communities with them.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next question is Joshua Frick. Joshua, let's see. Can you unmute yourself? All right. Joshua, can you unmute yourself? I'm trying to find you.
I don't see him in the participant list at the moment. He might have dropped off and be rejoining.
Okay. All right. We'll keep an eye out for him. Yeah.
I had one more question if there's not someone else waiting.
Yeah, go on, Catherine.
So when people are calling phone banking for you in the district, like what's the economic circumstances? Like who are like the primary employers? Like, just to help people be conversant with, who they're talking to when they're talking to your voters.
So it's, it really depends on what town that the person lives in. So for instance, in Palatka, it's very small, very rural, but there's a paper mill basically that is the biggest employer in Palatka. And so it's not a good company. It's an absolutely awful company. But at the same time, it's the only reason, or one of the only reasons, that the town still exists. In Clay County, in parts of Clay County, like the Jacksonville suburbs area, a lot more wealthy. And the biggest employers there are places like Walmart and McDonald's and things like that. Alachua is a little bit different. We have the city itself. That's where the University of Florida is at. So the University of Florida is actually one of the biggest employers. So it really depends on what town, because they are so different. Like our messaging and our branding and our marketing for Alachua is completely different on what we focus on compared to Clay County, which is completely different than Bradford, which is completely different than Palatka, or the northern part of Marion County, which is Ocala area. So we have a very large Latino and Hispanic population in the southern part of our district. We have a very large, basically middle-class white area in the northeastern part of our district. Alachua is everything, everybody and everything. It's the basically the blue spot within the giant red district. Union County is almost all prisons or prisoners. Bradford is extremely poor as well, and there's not much there as far as large companies. So at the end of the day, the thing, like I said, the biggest thing you can do is connect emotionally with people and show that their circumstances, whatever they are, like we understand them and we actually care about whether or not they're going to have a decent life, and show them that we have plans to do that. So like, for instance, in Palatka or Putnam County, I talk almost exclusively about a federal jobs guarantee to make sure that if you want a job, you're going to have one and it's going to pay very well. For Alachua County, the climate issues are number one always. Clay County is actually more faith-based as well, and more somewhat economic. It kind of shifts depending on what part of Clay County. Bradford and Union is really all about jobs, and that's it. And then also especially faith. And so those are the biggest issues and really things that people want to talk about when we talk to them.
Thank you.
Kimberly, did you have, yeah, Kimberly?
Yeah, I was just curious, as a small business owner, what skill have you gained from your time doing that has helped you in your campaign? And what do you anticipate the skills that you've learned from being a small business owner helping you in the future as a congressperson?
So I refer to this campaign as my third startup. I'll put it like this. So at the beginning of a business, a small business or a campaign, you have the idea that you think will work. And then you go out and you start talking and trying to make sure that number one, you can do it. And number two, that it's viable and that there's actually a market for that idea or for that product or for what you're doing. Then you test it, you build the prototype, you build the website, you get, the social media out there, you get the branding out there, you figure out what you want to do as far as logos, all of that kind of stuff. And then you get to the point where it's time to scale and it's time to actually build the team. It's time to actually move it forward. It's actually time to grow it as quickly as possible. And so I would honestly say that growing a small business is almost the exact same as running for office. It's the exact same mindset. It's almost the exact same process, depending on how you do it. Some people decide they need to bring on $200,000 to $500,000 right at the start to start a small business, and then hope that they can inflate the value and get out before it crashes. A lot of campaigns are run that way too, where somebody right at the start, they bring on $300,000 or $500,000 and they're like, okay, we're going to build a campaign. The way that I kind of thought about it was in the same way I thought about my business. I started my first company with $3,000 and I said, if I can't make it work with $3,000, there's no reason to believe I could do it with $100,000. And so we started with nothing, no funding basically, and just built it organically so that number one, it grew at the right pace, but also the fundamentals were there and the basics were there. And we actually built a structure that could scale, and we made sure it could scale before we started bringing on money and trying to scale it. And so I think that we've done a very good job at that, and just making sure that what we've actually built will stay here, whether or not we lose, whether or not this race ends. The organizing structure and the infrastructure that we built will be able to go on for multiple cycles as opposed to just this year. And so that I'm really proud of.
Thank you.
Right on. And just out of curiosity, the second part of that was what do you think will lead you into being a successful congressman?
My day job is catching corporate fraud. My day job is figuring out which big suppliers are trying to screw over small and family-owned businesses in the natural products industry. And so basically somebody brings me a product and they say, is this real? Can you figure it out for me? And then I call BS or tell them, yeah, sure, you should buy that. It's the right price. It's not fraudulent. It's good for you. And so that's kind of the way that I've approached this is, at the end of the day, most of the things that we have and the industries that we have, they're completely fraudulent. Most of the products are not good products, but they've been marketed very well. They've been branded very well. And what I've learned, especially through my business, is that the biggest companies in the world are not the ones that have the best product. They're the ones with the best distribution. They're the ones with the best marketing. And so what we have seen for, I think, the last 40 years is political parties that they do not have good policy, they do not have good ideas, but they're able to get people to attach emotionally to it, and they're able to market and brand themselves in a way that makes people want those things, despite the fact that they're not good for them, or they're fake, or they're fraudulent. And so for me, being able to pick out what is real and what is not, and what is actually going to be helpful, I think is a huge advantage just in mindset of how someone going to Congress and going to be sitting on these committees actually has to think and react.
Yeah, I have another question. I've seen that your district was elected a Democratic congressperson for like the beginning of the 2000s to 2010, and then flipped red. And what's been, how are the winds of change there that it's looking to, is it looking to flip blue, or like what's been the response to Yoho's thing?
Gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Gerrymandering is the reason that it is red now. So actually it was worse. Oh, it was worse. When Ted Yoho first ran, it was so badly gerrymandered that they were forced to go back and redraw it. And so what we've seen is a gradual shift, even in a super red district, towards more Democratic or left-leaning ideals. And so what we've seen is a gradual shift where it's been trending in the right direction, but it's not there yet. And we are hoping to be able to kick down that door just in how we're running our campaign. The Ted Yoho thing, number one, put North Central Florida on the map. Nobody knew where this was, and nobody really had any idea about who he was. He was one of only 4 people to vote against making lynching a federal crime. He didn't think the Civil Rights Act was constitutional. He doesn't believe in the Survivors' Bill of Rights or the ERA. Like, this is who the guy is. And yet nobody really did anything about it or really made the case, simply because he wasn't brazen enough to actually do most of this, like what he did on the steps of the Capitol. Like, it was not, how do I put this? It didn't make national news, not because it shouldn't have, but because he did it in a way that was so boring that nobody thought that anybody would care. And so what we saw, especially with AOC, is that it's very clear who he is and who he was. And now it's just blatantly obvious in a way that makes for a good story. And so what we realized beforehand was we have to get rid of this guy to begin with. We have to get rid of his infrastructure. We have to beat whoever he tries to set up. We have to get rid of his donors, and we have to organize to do that. And so we had already created all the infrastructure and pretty much everything that we had before that happened. And as soon as it happened, things took off because of it. So in a way, what he did was actually a gift to our area, because it showed people that we can't ever have that again.
Thank you. Joshua, you're here now for the question.
Yeah, sorry, I had to switch from my phone to my PC. So actually, I actually am curious what Adam thinks about this. I had a separate question, but with respects to Representative Yoho, so I actually was aware of him because he's a Freedom Caucus member, and I found it strange that he and AOC weren't able to get along because they agree on this one fundamental issue that is like my top issue. They refuse to dial for dollars, and I found it strange because, you know, Yoho isn't like leaving because he's worried. He's honoring his term limits commitment in 2012. And I just wanted to mention that because I've said this before, but like I'm a right-leaning independent. So like some of Andrew Yang, he brought in a bunch of different people into his, you know, fan group and whatnot. But yeah, I see that differently. I feel like AOC is kind of like playing that up a little bit, and I actually respect Congressman Yoho. I want to give you that feedback. Maybe the voters in your district don't feel that way.
Yeah, well, the thing is, especially the people in our district, I think they understand that Ted Yoho is not doing this because he's honoring some commitment. It's because he's only been in Congress, I think, 2 years where he has had any amount of power or any amount of ability to do anything besides just say no. And he's also realized he can make way more money being the person behind the scenes that actually pushes through everything than he can by just being in office. So for instance, his former campaign manager is running to replace him using his donors, his backing, his infrastructure, everything that he's got. So him claiming that he's stepping down and relinquishing power, that's a lie. At the end of the day, he's not relinquishing power. He's just stepping behind the scenes, behind the curtain, and he's still fully in control. And so people here understand that, and they see that, you know, if just because his name is no longer on the ballot does not mean that anything will ever fundamentally change, because his ideology will still be there, his donors will still be there, his entire power structure will still be there. And so what they understand is if you do not get rid of those things, then you never actually replace Ted Yoho, because in politics, you can put a new face or a new name, but if you never actually remove the people or the structure that got them there in the first place, then nothing will ever change.
I mean, that's a good point. I wish that Nancy Pelosi would step down and let her campaign manager step in and she run it from behind. But anyways, the question I had for you is, I'm super excited that Andrew and Humanity Forward are supporting candidates in Florida, because it's a battleground state and there's so much valuable, I think there's so many elections here that are really toss-ups. I wanted to know if you had any opinions on the race in Florida 15, where I believe the incumbent is a one-term Republican. He got my attention because he was talking about on Twitter that we need to build the wall, and I thought that was a dead horse. So I think that guy's an idiot. And we have three.
Do you know the name?
Russ Spano is the incumbent there, and then Alan Cohen, Adam Hattersley, and Jesse Felipe are the candidates in the Democratic primary. And then I also think that right next door to you in District 6, Richard Thripp and Clint Curtis are running. And so I just was wondering what your thoughts were on those other races.
I don't know 15 very well. We've been kind of focused. Richard's a great guy. We've talked quite a bit. I'm not entirely certain how his race is going at the moment, but you know, I like the guy a lot.
Okay, that's fair. Good luck.
All right.
Thanks. I wish I was able to actually like pay attention to other people's races, but we have been focused on not just our race, but actually our House district races as well. Because this year is one of the first years that Florida has put up Democratic challengers in every single race in Florida, especially because of the fact that next year is redistricting. And that wasn't going to happen. And so we were 90 for 90, which was out of Virginia, which helped them flip the state there. And then also the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida basically helped find and make sure that people could run in every single House district seat across the state. We were not going to have multiple House district candidates in our location, in our district, but we were able to help and partner with them and make sure we had somebody in every single House district, because I realized very quickly that, you know, the better that they do, the better I'm going to do. And the better that I do, the better that the Democratic Party does in November in the state of Florida with the presidential. And so for us, we are focusing basically on fighting for every single acre of land. We are fighting for every single vote, and we're not letting Republicans in our district have any free passes, because what I realized is, and what most people are starting to realize is, you don't play a football game with 8 players against 11. And that's what the Florida Democratic Party has done for years here in Florida. And I don't play defense. That does not happen. So we have gone on offense, especially in our district. And so we've got 4 out of the 5 House district candidates partnering with our campaign in order to get out the vote, in order to register people, in order to get vote by mail, in order to actually organize this location in a way that has never happened before. And so that's kind of that's why I've been a little focused.
Well, you actually touched on, because where I was going with that big picture was, I'm wondering, you know, how much interaction you've had with the Florida Democratic Party in general. And the reason I ask that is, you know, a lot of people think that, I live in Dallas, Texas, so a lot of people think that Texas is going to turn blue. And I think that that's a real thing, but I've also lived here 32 years and I'll believe it when I see it. So that makes Florida uber important. And I'm wondering what kind of collection and what type of camaraderie there is among all the groups that you talk to.
Currently, and in the previous years, there's been very little support for House district candidates or congressional candidates in races that are above +5 Republican. We are hoping that that changes, especially this year and going forward, because what we've seen is it is more effective to actually challenge everywhere than only challenge in 1 or 2 places. Because if you allow, let's put it this way, if, like I said, if you play with 8 players on a field, at the end of the day, you might score a couple of touchdowns, you might get lucky, but you're going to lose 9 times out of 10 simply because you are outmanned and outgunned, and there were more people on the other side, and you had to divide your resources. And you can have the best players, but you know, if you're not actually forcing them to spend money or campaign or actually create infrastructure in places they never wanted to, then you're not actually going to efficiently and effectively be able to counter that. So in the past, Republicans didn't have to actually run anyone. Basically, they didn't have any challengers, which means they didn't have a primary or a general election, so they can move all of their resources to the contested races, which meant that in the contested races, they were triple or quadruple teaming those people. And so, yeah, you can win a lot of contested races, but at the same time, if you are getting outmanned and outgunned and outspent every single time, you're not going to be able to do as well. And so what we've realized is it's not a good strategy. Just across the board, it's not a good strategy. And so I'm glad that the Florida Democratic Party is starting to realize that, and they are starting to change the way that they have effectively done things. And so I don't know what's going to happen in Texas. I don't know what's going to happen in Florida. I can only speak about our district, and we have received little to no support whatsoever from the Florida Democratic Party at this point from the heads. But at the same time, we are organizing our location with the understanding that when we make this race close, that they will see that and actually want to come in and help. And so we are building it. It's the build it and they will come kind of mentality. And that is what we have taken. And either way, we're going to do very well. And either way, we've built something that is good and will last. And we're hoping that they come in at the end and actually push us over the line as well.
One answer. Thank you so much for that.
All right.
I've got a quick question. How many people are you trying to call in your get out the vote operation?
I think we have a list of 20,000 right now that we are wanting to call within the next week and a half. And those are all people that have vote by mail ballots at this moment. And so we've already called, I think we called over 6,000 or 7,000 people this last week. And so we're trying to ramp that up and hit every single one of them. And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
All right. Thank you.
All right, I think that's wrapping up our Q&A segment. And Adam, you had a wonderful slide with some data. So how about we go back to screen share? You want to tell us a little bit
Sure.
about your district in terms of its numbers? Let's see if I'm working on this.
Yeah, I remembered I had done that. And then I was like, oh, I guess we're going to be talking about other stuff because I forgot about it.
Oh, okay.
That's my bad. That's not your bad.
Yeah, I
No
don't.
worries.
If it shows up, it seems like I'm having technical difficulties here. It was a great slide. I hope we get to it. Okay.
I
Renee,
can
what
share
do-
my screen instead if you want me
do
to.
that, Yanni. Thank you. Oh, here.
I was going to say, like, in terms of time, could we move on to his phone banking slide and then maybe we can keep going?
What was that, Elaine?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I was saying because I know we have a bunch of other slides to get to, that phone banking might be the most important one before we
this
move on.
is the end. These are the last slides.
Yep, this is the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Thanks, Yanni. You saved the day.
Yeah, so I
So,
mean, as you can kind of see right there, you know, our average income here in this district is ridiculously low. It's basically survival level at this point, and that was really before the pandemic. And so those numbers are obviously not accurate, but that's what it was before the pandemic. And as we all know, you know, 40% of people in the United States only had $400 in their bank account for an unexpected expense before the pandemic, and we are 5 months into this. And so it's not going well. We have basically the average, you know, household income for the Asian community is almost $4,000 less than the average for white households. Hispanic is 20,000. Black households are 30,000 less. And one of the biggest things, especially with this pandemic, let me check and see what is going on here. Oh, there we go. One of the biggest things, you know, that we are dealing with, especially everyone across the country is dealing with, is housing. They're estimating about 28 million people may be homeless or evicted within the next few months, which is unfeasible number, like just unthinkable numbers. But what we already had before this was the fact that 75% of our minority communities already had issues with housing. And 30% of them were severe issues with housing and being able to afford and basically having locations to live and stay and, you know, stability. And so what we are looking at and what we were looking at when we first started this campaign and what we were first talking about, it never changed. That's what's crazy is that our messaging before the pandemic was almost the exact same as after the pandemic happened because nothing fundamentally changed. It just exacerbated the issues we already had. And so, you know, right now, especially, we have to fix these issues, make sure that people have a home, make sure they have stability, make sure they have enough money to, you know, actually take care of themselves and, you know, have a decent life. And at the end of the day, that's not radical. We're not fighting for anything that's radical. We are literally fighting for the American dream, or at least what we've been told is supposed to be the American dream, but we've never actually seen. And so that is right now, especially here, just a rallying cry for people. And so it's something that, you know, even I'm dealing with it. Our campaign is dealing with it. The people on our campaign are dealing with it. The people that we talk to every single day are dealing with it. And so it's one of those things where we don't have a choice. We have to change this or else we're only going to be fighting for survival forever. And so that's kind of the way that's almost the message and kind of the way we talk about this is we know what's wrong. We just need to fix it.
So we did have another slide for you, Adam, on the issues. I think that we've
I think
kind
we
of
hit 'em
gone
all.
over. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got the phone banking schedule slide.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of phone banking coming up pretty much all this week. We got, what do we got? We got 9 days left till actual voting day. Almost half the ballots actually have already been turned in because of vote by mail or early voting, which is great. So it looks like we're going to have record turnout for this primary. At the same time, you know, there's a lot of people whose minds that we can still change and actually get to vote for us. We've had great reactions and anecdotal evidence and everything else that's come through has all been extremely positive. It's kind of crazy because when we're actually talking to people on the phone, like 80 to 90% of them, number one, know who we are or are already voting for us, which is just great. And so we're getting very positive feedback, especially in this primary. We're even last night with me talking to Republicans, we were getting great feedback from them as well, where they loved the things that we were talking about, like UBI, like a federal jobs guarantee. And so really talking about the basics and talking about, you know, I mean, literally it's the basics. It's housing, it's making sure that they're taken care of, that their families are taken care of, and they're not scared of losing their home. At this moment is really the biggest things to talk about, and making sure that people actually have enough money. I mean, they're working, and so they should be able to be making enough money to survive.